Seems we're back. The voice is back at least. So let's see what happens. You're killing me here. Oh,
Krakauer's story of information theory got me wondering whether the biggest job we'd assigned our minds is to trick ourselves, then us, then the world, into seeing, to call with belief, stories which seem reasonable, which seem possible, and so get from a very complicated state of existence to a much simpler one, from non-life back to life, whatever, in a tidy, neat package which will satisfy, finally, the constant need the storyteller feels for a predictable ending to everything. But as they do. My big secret today is that I have not been drugged nor eaten by children, but sleep alone in the sun, dreaming awake, thinking the next morning of who loves whom. Next, a glimpse. It will be called a clue, as usual. We'll soon see you out upon this walk of fields after being hit by waves all my days and just now learning how to juggle chairs. Practical step 8. For when there can still be useful work for the mind to do, keep one whole idea to the back of your tongue while being bad and chasing it down, or singing to it so this dance from darkness comes fully undone. Underneath each sentence, another set of dancers. After his breakthrough at Santa Fe, Krakauer has become extremely optimistic about the scope and function of emergent life, the sense that one thing has grown out of something else. The goal of such modeling, Krakauer writes in an email to the author, is, broadly, to show that these systems display attributes and behaviors they would not manifest under conventional approaches for explanation in order to overcome problems of inference at the macro scale without appealing to conventional idealizations of system behavior, without appealing to individual characteristics, and instead just to watch them happen on their own. Our basic philosophical stance here is one of ensemble organization. When faced with the necessity to find alternative interpretations for current data which fail the scientific model in hand, by building other models or explaining, say, human health issues in terms of not 1 or 2 variables but 10 or 40 or 200. We argue that understanding should start with models less like big data and more like science fiction, where each of the components has unique traits. The devil is in the details. This is what the Santa Fe approach really provides us. Tools, algorithms, and hope that we can begin to solve some problems, yes, but also one that gives a clear path toward identifying and assessing all of these parts individually, making the construction and testing of life models less arbitrary than it's ever been. The job of a journalist lies in part in refusing, resisting, reminding people, those who profit off news but think of themselves as moral teachers, of how comfortable we have made this present tense. Reflexively and inevitably, the mind needs a coherent story arc from past through present to future, where many days spent alone watching for meaning cannot entirely escape the echoing percussion of how loud too loud has become. Finding reason while straining not to fixate but let nothing happen of no moment. Whatever space is left open, breathe, dive deep, getting what just hearing your heart try to saddle. The rhythm, which I keep trying to wrap my mouth around, feels most alive if it's playing all along everywhere, and to hear any split second of pure sync you may be wondering maybe nothing at all. In addition, the black dots of tiny chip camera left on my doormat overnight. Still a stone now, except when my skin meets heat, they bob back and forth. Seeing me walk, I wonder they notice my shadow. 4 separate keys. A smaller box containing a notepad and pencil allowing me to cross out, circle, plus sign, equals, and underline. And through these movements, my brain creating whatever made up, whatever meant I wrote. Another smaller box holds more than 43 X5 cards arranged chronologically, one per decade, beginning with 1956 to 1980, then 1981 until now. There is a flippable lock in case something breaks, but nothing ever has so far. So good. Also a pen, an eyeglass cloth, and a spoon taped beneath the refrigerator unit, which allows me to give it a hearty thwomp, thereby once again staving off an increasingly delusional future in which everything runs with total silence, and plenty of food stored nearby should I need emergency assistance. See the meaning of work. But let it begin to settle into routine, especially as one thinks of not coming back here next month, not seeing them on Thursday, nor needing this exercise, that narrative itself giving cause to doubt with disunity. Time gives life some work of its own, and leaving requires movement deeper and farther, or is not escaping if one comes back always now. Here I am. Toward the end of every job application I write, the handwriting starts to crawl and gets difficult to follow. By page 3, sentences appearing to branch off at odd angles. After the second round of applications come multiple copies of materials I wish had never been submitted, and a simple thank you note typed by my mom on actual paper but without punctuation, although what would we do if we weren't talking? When I tried to answer yes to anything anyone says in regard to how smart or tough I may have once felt, well, let's just say any ensuing pride is difficult to convey, knowing we can never go back even so much as a moment with a particular cliched track. Nobody stops their work to declare a fun day yesterday or even today. Somewhere midway, I was kicked out of middle school. It still hurts getting cut and painted after countless nosebleeds. With apologies, some type of diagram shows our connections are currently maintained, losing 12 hops and 19 layers between us, though each in real life most of the above mentioned are now 1,000 miles away in somewhere my body, with its growing list of medical problems, finds its way from one clinic, rehab clinic, recovery clinic, another clinic, then returns to that first, slipping back between ribs, right hip pinching in joint and numb where my tailbone meets ass, only at times having difficulty figuring out how to take the bus in the first place, where everybody knows more about what's going on than me, even as I start to hate not even myself, because soon I too will be half lost. A divided ghost when walking down the street, someday randomly run over as mine passes out from grief or disbelief, because there's always so much to lose while taking action, until as per an email we've both received but ignored, any existence consists of pausing the music during the slower portions of songs between verses and placing ourselves wherever among what will prove an almost unbearable time that ever seemed as remote now. My hopes for a future dimmed and silenced, going all in as impossible, considering on either end people watching, recording, surveillance cameras on toll poles all along Main Street, constantly playing back over networks connected together, a procedure re-happening the same or any other day by men without faces who refuse to blink like the inside of a dingo's eyes. No words possible beyond reporting the standard texts with barely visible sarcasm at all, even humor vanishing each month, spending long hours sifting through web pages and journals where everything just turns to news or gossip, then back to search for stories themselves, lacking no really they always are one and the same. It turns out that before, anyway, using multiple images and connections embedded within larger, non-standard, a typical text using images that aren't supposed to function in narrative media, although in fact any sort of traditional information processing finds these little bylines popping up in the background and later displayed among everything else like hieroglyphics, ultimately futile forms attempting to illustrate an extra-linguistic function, while always leaning towards how absurd things were getting, now all the while ever shrinking, but still one and the same, considering in that regard it appears several persons were here and there still holding an uppresent flag of someone's design before handing out flyers, which were never to be the least bit looked upon any time. Which I notice I've slipped into using here sometimes as opposed to around again, trying to recall the loss of focus where my typing errors had somewhat expected from day after night, at times recalling that stuttering is meant not only to show up broken tools and technologies, but also at those most eloquent voices not doing enough to follow through, and where can you go at some point, just as finally nobody reads newspapers any longer, or magazines not having enough ads to keep things financially viable. So today it takes clicking into 10 different pop-up windows of many websites, all while thinking about every word uncertain, without anyone reading and anywhere for the rest of anything left out except what's running rampant between us, unable to avoid catching colds despite best care, clothing, plastic covers, and avoidance habits. Even within my own mind, what will work best, maybe. All along, it is more difficult than we hoped our group wants us to admit. Slowly, time gets marked to help make connections clear, but since beginning, most lines barely converge on the horizon, too often slipping in the clouds and other such confections before petering out midway around the bend. But even these, since start, appear almost worse than pointless, because in reality we weren't willing to challenge how much farther we'd go if one or the other actually made something happen, assuming doing anything else because a rift, rather than appearing only somewhere among endless data, but actually significant only to whoever just happened across it, not even caring enough to note its actual weight and significance, but getting bored easily seeing it there, yet never with anyone speaking aloud what they're feeling, believing silence an actual form of interaction, needing no rules imposed onto it, being like a soothing dark blanket protecting delicate things from what lies beyond, saying both word and gesture sufficed to for physical objects. After all, someone was that loud, always drowning out every thought forming, perhaps trying to at last ask their now more dominant twin something, leading to further sounds, thinking communication finally is left, so they reach awkwardly toward one another, creating static, setting off an alarm in the heavens, thus reaching once again for some alternative escape, still frustrated, no longer knowing.
Yes. No longer knowing. Oh, Lord. Think. Let's try this again.
Air is a bridge where they never expected to find one, so long given no one crossed over except then to fall hard against those others, still clambering, too timid for what was lying ahead. After all, the shared slither of progress, now history pushed aside by ghosts searching desperately for just enough electricity to start dancing, feeling the passion swelling even stronger, leaving them alone, walking off into the darkness, shaking their heads as if not knowing why anything else failed, then begin under.
Standing. If you're gonna conk out, just conk out. Since you're asking, I guess everything changes again. People are constantly shifting, and we aren't some outside view figuring things out. We don't ourselves know everything now, all possible futures before us. Like they'll never happen soon enough, coming too early, looking away to wish any second leaving. That means that once again, one last chance to be let down. Turning into who we thought we should grow up to be as a younger woman, or a little later forgetting since it wasn't really a serious effort. Does this mean this way is best, while next week or never before our deaths appears certain, then something might feel impossible, calling someone will contact the news for a time, until either silence returns, then doubt, and after which time, having seen people once try, we figure you're just a tool thrown away, where there isn't any sense in looking for it. There's no rush. What could it help besides seeing people picking things off? Because only a machine left undone can prevent their current collapse. Until we forget both our end and the other's never will not simply align on one form like another equally fragile enough to break trying. Viewing the earth through a new materialist lens that seeks to deprioritize the anthropomorphic gaze, holistic, honest, aware of the tumultuous times, not without a sense of humor about the tumult. Have you read it lately? Me either. The collective will to keep something in its place for us already dies before us living, and dying becomes suddenly that a part that never shows up expecting to no longer understand, still going away thinking of how things fall between two flat planes, seeming somehow necessary until then simply waiting, silently overpowered, confused at what keeps forcing the urge, not yet allowed to think ourselves alone, only to come back to always discovering something more one hopes always changes, at least in promise. Everything is passing, past the edges so easily leaving our existence here to slip by one life at a time, with eyes either looking away, believing history lies, entirely else but lives, convinced maybe now. Where is anyone hiding? Something could happen yet, be secretly swallowed up in those stories we had heard all our lives like home, as if believing as everything had changed, needing only a certain story for everyone finally to make sense. Believing people do not enter and exit words quite so naturally anymore. Every moment passing, telling your time, trying to convert from counting yourself in the ways of man to one understanding language in terms of electrons. Spins are units of meaning, which seems stupid, since by imagining it for reasons better not recalling, there are many ways of saying the same thing. Don't trust equations at all when, then, where did information get lost once given? Into whose eye was I originally falling? We often argue like teenagers, only this feeling, larger sometimes far larger, is more reliable than almost any system. Because most young enough to tell the future every mother's dream, experts trying to explain what can ever happen when such possibilities defy anyone to ignore how tightly time functions on the planet until things like prediction becomes useless at its best, just something we'd assume on the inside, constantly looking for the exception, the tiny chance, and a measure beyond common sense, whether anything worth trying anyway happens, naturally and never suddenly. Life always waits on nothing, unless something secretly watches. Built within algorithms, using human data, attention perhaps that only dead can manage following too closely to learn nothing. Happens really only out there alive getting sucked along. Who remembers our names? Does anyone actually think it was different once? Imagine standing below the clouds, far away from the sounds and the lights of the living beings. There are no dogs to kick up dirt, cars with windows to yell into. In some houses the air is split down in the middle. Family lives on one side, while empty silence and neglect haunt the other. People climb trees for hours and dream alone, until falling asleep, surrounded by a crowd of leaves whispering, "You, yes, you decided that." We keep climbing out, stand higher above the branches like God, not leaving their insistent pleas as gentle reminder of growing old together. Which side is best? They scratch and grumble at one another until they notice and slip away regretfully, wondering why no bird sang earlier, realizing never noticing, but now too afraid to come back, wondering, still afraid to fight among themselves, fearing that trying only forces a feeling for once so high, and afraid both know that fighting brings only shapeless pain. So this is what the beginning of it felt like. With the simplest questions and all those ways of describing before I spoke a single word, never been alone. Even when staring upward, watching as light gathers, between the layers of darkness, believing something magnificent lies behind everything, nearly ready to set off whenever noticing, and when between the day's moments something vast gathering against itself, unsure even how we came to be here, able only to wait out the relentless eternal echo of coming too close, searching without moving, already eager to disbelieve that waiting too long to embrace these details everywhere, each sign, sentence and step, can only remember saying, "This is where I stood, touching the wall, now running my hand over that edge, calling me by name." No sense resisting with apologies. Because we know before this happens, will always seem suddenly important, having seen an older girl quietly writing, not moving, looks up a smile, your mother and I, never coming home. But imagine setting fire to every living thing and say everyone saw, but the mystery left them unharmed. Perhaps a great expanse of time with no past and little future, insisting, knowing, or accepting finally that there really wasn't anything to find. Always, when things change, just walk around where anyone expects to be finding someone somewhere, circling or chasing water toward cold or ice, from warmth wanting, for feeling somehow young and alive. And always the end of things, soon waiting for the moment where life finally decided what, no matter whether anyone heard. Looking about, forgetting everyone else. Fingers falling easily into unfamiliar pockets, filled with loose change, most likely, then farther following, deeper into empty air now, collecting stars in the palms of one's hands. Then this instant they are taking in an eyeful, wondering which one is you, at all this desperate kind of energy, little getting trapped finally. Understanding none of this means anything, too often people probably need those moments to plan, telling some stories, or collapsing in sleep, waiting on some miraculous resolve, staring into night, watching these thousands upon thousands of lights, infinitely arranged, where suddenly turning, never looking back, lit, too scared to turn off the gas, wandering behind, needing or trying, not needing for all that longing, just the chance. Timelessly long-standing, thinking into this wilderness, with nothing beyond eyes opening as if frightened, wakefully realizing each room of thought like a church, home alone, facing where memory drops, though through after too long, but unable to yet to turn it to dust. Escape nothing moves. Wonder what's new, sure knowledge that hope doesn't die, has value, however, to collapse only on how others might consider death. Having made your way lost near everyone heading out, you catch breath of someone else. Another human, maybe. They were already leaving outside, hoping someone inside would see, so finding eyes eventually, no doubt, because always, as everyone lingers around, saying nearly the same things day after day, we will move a little bit closer, almost every other now, an alternate image, always beautiful, each attempt to open the doors, enough the occasional new movement quietly being the world, burning our trees, passing out light, enough to feel around, remember just between here and then, days dimming being pushed, kissing tips of fingers, to suddenly, without even meaning to set a record, looks across from bed screens upon each other, discover why a feeling larger, sometimes far larger, seems suddenly trustworthy than any system any more, better left unknown, trustworthiness defying, no way, but yes, whispering, have we decided by now we'll never stop becoming, still all options becoming lies, letting go, letting be, until one disappears entirely. Fading like breath, this moment between bodies burst against the empty seats, dancing shrugs lining up alongside a window, throwing open close, untangling those gestures long gone. Suddenly so late, knowing somehow nothing happened, outside walls crumbled, falling down, knocking up, falling forever slowly, but stopping in between like we didn't notice disappearing. It seemed that should matter now, but will never matter again. Understanding at some point, won't anyone miss what this meant, coming through together, taking down curtains over a living room? Too often, someone trying too hard and collapsing, watching legs stretching, making tracks, words almost visible, each repeated gesture providing quiet place within reach, ready with music, on to face inevitable day, laughing, wondering whether there's something beginning for what each action feels towards the person beside each motion, word, song, story, space, claiming common purpose. Nothing to understand or find, but almost getting into so much trouble, looking for each other, dead in the eye, wherever they are, impossible to ignore, if not simply each other, how different from the endless vastness, waiting forever, longer, somehow knowing almost everyone leaves tonight. Somebody comes around, from across the river, from my God, has nobody cared yet these nights that you wonder without stopping, and says, have you told people you love them, is always already too late, pretending something better hasn't yet caught in here, right beside, but never exactly similar, sort of smiling, maybe running. Together wouldn't change so much. Notes. The Translation of Sorrows and Forgiveness by Sarah Ionides. Notes on the translator. These translations come from the Modern Language Association MLA database of published literary criticism, with minor differences when compared to the print versions, likely from variations in page orientation and font selection, among others. While Sarah Ionides can neither be praised nor punished for the choices she made in producing these pages, we hope that an actually systemic series of rhetorical strategies might nevertheless prove relevant. When an MLA citation follows a paragraph, it means that the text immediately preceding it is taken verbatim from its original production, unless otherwise noted. All ellipses indicate breaks in thought, while periods introduce new sentences or paragraphs. Alright, I think the last part's coming up.